So welcome everyone, I'm Reverend Kate Dean. I'm proud to serve as the minister for this Unitarian community, and we are really delighted to have singers with us today, and Humanist singers at that. There are historic links between Unitarians and Humanists, and we Unitarians don't require a belief in God to be welcomed into our communities. And I would say a fair number of our chapel members are agnostic or moving in that direction. The American Humanist Association has its origins in the Humanist Manifesto, produced by mainly Unitarian ministers. So it would seem appropriate to light our chalice this morning with words from Dr. Anthony Fauci, the immunology scientist and frequent face during this COVID crisis. He has been named the Humanist of the Year in the US. And so we light our chalice this morning, this symbol of our liberal faith, with a short quote taken from Dr. Fauci's speech to graduating students last year. Dr. Fauci said, "Now is the time, if ever there was one, for us to care selflessly about one another." Now is the time, if ever there was one, for us to care selflessly about one another. So I now invite our choir to give our opening music. Thank you, that was lovely. We now have a time to think of our joys and our concerns, the happy things in our life and in the life of the world, and those that also concern us. I'm going to light a few candles to represent all of our joys and concerns. One of my joys was a wonderful wedding yesterday, and we still have some of the flowers to decorate our chapel. And Shenandoah was also sung at that wedding, so a good connection with today's service. Of course, we have concerns in the life of the world and those who are suffering in other parts of the world. And we also have our own concerns of loved ones who are perhaps unwell, so we think of them as well. And finally, this Sunday, those of us who've been chapel members for a while will remember Anne Finer, and so we mark the anniversary of her death. And so flowers are appropriate today because she loved flowers so much, and we'll be celebrating her life with more flowers next Sunday. I was just about to say, may the peace that we now feel in this place stay with us, but maybe not the echoing. It's always lovely to have the children with us, and we'll have a story for all ages in a little while, but first it is our practice to greet one another at the beginning of a service. So I invite you to turn to someone near you to say your name, and please welcome them to chapel this morning. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to hear all of the conversation bubbling, and I hope we can continue those sharings after the service, as we'll have some refreshments outside. But now it's time for our story. It's a story for all ages, but I'll ask the little ones to please come and join me at the front. I hope you can hear me through this microphone. Channel 3, Jack, if you need to know. I'll speak up a bit because I'm not sure if you're getting it through the speakers. So hello, hello. It's so lovely to see all of you here. It's really exciting to be back in September, a new school year, new things to experience, and we also have a new children's chapel coordinator, Maya, so you'll be playing with her a bit later, as well as all of your other friends. So this month we have a theme of embracing possibility. Sounds very grand, doesn't it? But it's really about looking out for the new things that you might enjoy. So this is a really good time to be thinking about, what new things do I want to try? And this story is called Adventures of a Puddlefish. And it's a traditional story, but it's retold by Margaret Silf. So I thank Margaret Silf for this one. We're sort of thinking about what if, what could we do? So there was a big tree near a river, and in the wet season, a puddle would form in the roots. Can you imagine a really big tree with really thick roots? And so when there's lots of rain, there'll be a big puddle, really great for splashing around in. And a small group of puddlefish settled in. They thought this would be a nice home to have. They started swimming in circles and trying to catch little water beetles and fighting over what they caught. A brightly coloured rainbow fish flopped into their puddle. This was a bit of a surprise. It was beautiful, it was shining with iridescence, and it was smiling. "Where have you come from?" the puddlefish asked. And the rainbow fish said, "I come from the ocean. It's what we're made for. It goes on forever and ever, and it's full of wonderful creatures, brimming with movement and life. Leap into the river and it will take you to the ocean." Well, the puddlefish didn't know what to think about this. They were just used to swimming around in their own little puddle. And it turned out there are 3 types of puddlefish, 3 different species perhaps. One is the realist puddlefish. And this puddlefish will say, "This puddle is reality. You are deluded about the ocean." Then there was the scaredy fish who was really scared of new things. No one would ever dare to make that leap into the unknown. Then there was the political fish who said, "Both sides of the argument have merit, and we should form a discussion group to talk it through." Now, the rainbow fish listened to all of these discussions, and he said, "Talking won't get you to the ocean. The summer is coming, and so there'll be lots of sunshine, and it will dry up the water, and soon this puddle will be gone, and then what?" So the rainbow fish leapt back into the river and went on its way. And a few very brave puddlefish took a leap into the river, into something new. But the others gazed in pity and just went back to swimming in circles and catching little water beetles and fighting over what they caught. So which do you think we should be? Should we be the little puddlefish who stayed in the puddle, or should we be the puddlefish who leapt into the river? You think we should leap into the river? I think so too. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy your children's chapel activities. We're going to listen to some music while the children leave for their chapel activities. I now invite Stuart Dean to give our reading. Stuart, as some of you may know, is the husband of the minister, but also a chapel member and a member of the Humanist choir.
This reading comes from the book The Possible and the Actual by the molecular biologist Francois Jacob, and is chosen by our guest speaker today, Dr. Kat Arney. Kat says about this passage, it was written in the early 1980s, but still has a lot of wisdom about the nature of reality and the role of science in uncovering it. And I find this passage relevant for the work that I do. I work in scientific publishing, but I am a non-scientist. So I've found the lengthy and specific and sometimes obscure titles of the papers and articles that we publish to be alien to me. But by talking to those who use the experiences that I help design, I can see that the very specific studies help push the boundaries of knowledge just a bit further, and by doing so can uncover the knowledge that others need to do their own boundary pushing. So Francois writes, "It is probably a need of the human brain to have a representation of the world that is united and coherent. A lack of unity and coherence frequently results in anxiety and schizophrenia. It seems only fair to say that, as far as coherence and unity are concerned, mythical explanation often does better than scientific explanation. For science does not aim to reach a complete and definitive explanation of the whole universe. It proceeds by detailed experimentation on limited areas of nature. It looks for partial and provisional answers for certain phenomena that can be isolated and well-defined. Other systems of explanation, whether mythical, magical, or religious, encompass everything. They apply to every domain. They answer every possible question. They account for the origin, the present state, and even the ultimate fate of the universe. One may disagree with this type of explanation offered by myth and magic. One cannot, however, deny their unity and coherence, since, with no hesitation, they can answer every question and explain everything by one simple a priori argument. At first glance, science appears to be less ambitious than myth in this type of question it poses, and the kind of answer it seeks. In fact, the beginning of modern science can be dated from a time when such general questions as, how was the universe created? What is matter made of? What is the essence of life? Were replaced by more modest questions like, how does a stone fall? How does water flow in a tube? What is the course of blood in the body? Curiously enough, this substitution had a quite unexpected result. While asking general questions led to very limited answers, asking limited questions turned out to provide more and more general answers. This is still valid for present-day science. The capacity to judge what problems are ripe for analysis, to decide what is useful to reinvestigate, when it is useful to reinvestigate old territory, to re-examine questions that were once considered to be as solved or insoluble, remains one of the most important qualities of a scientist.
I now invite you into a time of meditation and stillness. So do make yourselves comfortable. We begin with a few calm, deep breaths in and out. Let us take this time to reconnect with what is most important to us, to reflect on the wonder of the universe, and just to be for a few moments. We now return our attention to this peaceful place as we listen to a little more music. I thought I would give a little introduction of Dr. Kat Arney while we just check our final tech setup. Dr. Kat Arney is an award-winning science writer, broadcaster and public speaker, and is the founder and creative director of First Create the Media. Her latest book is Rebel Cell: Cancer, Evolution and the Science of Life. Her recent Radio 4 series, Ingenious, looked at the science and the stories behind our genes, from the fat gene to the eyeball gene and more. Kat is one of those enviable all-rounders. As well as her science background, she is a multi-talented musician who can also knit a lovely pair of socks. So I'm just going to check with Jack to see if all is well.
Hello, can everyone hear me? I hope so. Yeah, I'm going to hope that everyone can hear me, and I am going to start talking. So thank you so much to Kate for having me. So as we get started, I want you all to sit back, relax, close your eyes, because we are going on a journey through time nearly 4 billion years back to meet an organism called LUCA. This is the last universal common ancestor. It's the cell from which all life on Earth evolved. So yep, every single cell in your body, every cell in the tree outside the window, every cell in the goldfinch that chirps in its branches, or the colonies of bacteria lurking in your toilet bowl, trace their way all the way back to this first single cell in an unbroken chain of division. Now, this process of cells dividing is the fundamental engine that drives the profusion of life on Earth. It's what turns a tiny seed into a giant tree, a lump of yeasty dough into a loaf of bread, a fertilized egg into a baby. And it's also the process that turns a single cell into a deadly cancer. Now let's start back with LUCA again. So it was spawned in the dark, suffocating environment of the early Earth around deep sea hydrothermal vents. It was a simple bacteria-like cell that somehow managed to figure out how to replicate. Now, we don't know a lot about LUCA. We don't know exactly what it looked like, but we certainly do know that it enjoyed being single. So when LUCA split from 1 into 2, those 2 cells split into 4, into 8, but they were all separate cells doing their own thing. Now, this kind of, wild single life, it continued for about 1 billion years, but, eventually it's time to settle down. And so cells on the Earth, they began to club together. They began to communicate with each other and form small multicellular communities. Now, at first, these were kind of little loose collectives, but over thousands, millions of years, they evolved into organized multicellular life. The cells figured out how to specialize and differentiate their many parts. They formed distinct tissues and organs. And, eventually we have the kinds of bodies that we have today, of all the different kinds of life on Earth. Now, there's a lot of advantages to being multicellular. So, you can grow big, you can eat rather than being eaten. You can run faster and get away from things. Your cells can have their own jobs to do. It makes you more efficient as an organism. And you can produce useful goodies that stay within your body and help to support you rather than going out into the world around you. There are some disadvantages to becoming multicellular. It means that each cell loses its own autonomy. You should only replicate exactly when and where it's necessary. You become part of a bigger community. So this might be during development, it might be to grow, to repair. But overall, there must clearly be lots of advantages to being a multicellular organism because multicellular life has evolved. Now, cells within, as I said, cells within a larger organism, you can work together to create things like public goods, nutrients and chemicals that support your growth. And this is all really important. And this multicellular lifestyle, it only really works if everything is tightly controlled. So cells should only proliferate when and where they're meant to. Cells should do the job they're meant to do. They should not take up more resources than they need. They should clean up after themselves, and they should die when they're damaged, faulty, or no longer needed. Now, this is fundamentally what makes multicellular organisms work. For example, in terms of doing the jobs you're meant to do, a nerve cell in your brain can't suddenly decide that it's bored and start making insulin. That's not what it's meant to do. It needs to be a nerve cell. Cells in your skin need to stay where they are, making your skin. They can't just go crawling off on a journey and go, today, I think I'm going to be a liver cell. That would not work. Same thing if cells decided to proliferate too much, or if damaged cells accumulated, or if they all started pumping toxic waste into the body without clearing it up. So we can think of the rules that make healthy tissues, healthy cells. These are actually the same kind of rules that make any society function well. And problems are going to arise if too many individuals in a society decide to go their own way. Now, as an example of this, I'm going to introduce you to the cheating amoebas. Now, these are soil-dwelling slime molds known as Dictyostelium discoidum. I'm going to call them Dicty for short. Now, these are just little single-celled kind of, imagine like a little amoeba thing wiggling around, and they live in the soil, and they are single cells as long as life is good. As long as there's plenty of tasty bacteria to eat, these single cells just start going around doing their own thing. But when the food runs low, they send out an SOS. It causes all the amoebas in the area to cluster together. Up to 100,000 of them will make a little slimy blob. Scientists call this a slug because it's kind of what it looks like. So it's a couple of millimeters long, and they all join together, and this slug starts moving in search of a better world, a spot with the right temperature and humidity. And when it gets there, this slug transforms again. It pushes up a stalk with this little bud-shaped spore body on the top. It bursts open and scatters tiny spores out into the world in the hope of finding more amenable conditions. And any one of these spores can generate into a new amoeba and start life again. So the life cycle of Dicty, it's a really good example of the benefits of multicellularity. These individual cells have come together to enable them to reproduce, to keep life going when the going gets tough. Now, it does also highlight the downside of multicellularity. So about 80% of the cells that make up this slug will become spores. They will get another shot at life. But the remaining 20% end up in the stalk. That's it. They will die. They've sacrificed themselves for the greater good of their colony. But even in this really simple system, there are cheats that break the rules. Now, back in 1982, a Yale biologist, Leo Buss, he noticed some antisocial behavior going on in these slime molds. He saw that some cells were more likely to end up in that spore body and go out into the world again. And about a quarter of a century later, another researcher in Texas, Gad Shulsky, figured out that certain genetic changes, we call them mutations, in any one of 100 different genes in these tiny, tiny slime molds enabled the cells to cheat their neighbors and make them much more likely to get up into that all-important spore. Now, you have to be really careful not to imply agency or intelligence on behalf of these cells. They are responding to their genetic programming, and it's been shaped by millions of years of natural selection. But, once a genetic variation, a mutation arises in an amoeba that makes it more likely to get up to the top of the stalk, that cell is more likely to survive, keep on multiplying, and make more with that same cheating mutation. It's amazing that in an organism as simple as a slime mold, there are so many genes that help to maintain this social behavior. And, it's incredible that just a few changes in these genes can throw the social rules out of the window. Now, scaling up from Dicty, the world is full of endless examples of cheats and scumbags who break the rules of their society. Another one I love from nature is the Cape honeybee. And these bees live in a very strict hierarchical colony. They're divided into female workers and male drones, and they're ruled over by the queen bee. And she's the only female in the hive that gets to reproduce. And if she goes missing, though, some workers can reactivate their ovaries and start laying unfertilized eggs that hatch into male drones. So the colony can in some way keep going. But in a small mutation in a single gene, a honeybee worker can rearrange their reproductive processes to become a queen. And a certain mutation means that they can do that even if there's already a queen present. So effectively, you can end up with lots and lots of the worker bees all becoming queens. They don't do their jobs anymore. They just sit around making more of themselves with these changes. And in fact, like groups of these kind of fake queen bees can invade neighboring hives, and they take over from the queen, and then they just keep making more queens. So no bees are doing any work. And gradually the hives fill up and the colonies collapse. Now, multicellular organisms, we have evolved over 1 billion years to function as societies of cells. So this is about tissues and about organisms. And every unit works towards its role, towards the common good and the propagation of the species, rather than the needs of each individual cell. And this cell division is tightly controlled. It's dictated by lots and lots of complex, intertwined molecular genetic pathways, so that each cell only divides when and where it's needed. Disorder is not tolerated. There's no space for damaged or disobedient cells, and troublemakers are encouraged to get rid of themselves for the good of the rest. This is cells. It's a brutal world in there. Old cells are peacefully put to sleep. But this is a strict regime, but it's what keeps our tissues healthy, and it keeps us alive. But as I've said, with the dictyostelium, with the queen bees, cheats will always arise and will bend the rules. And I'm sure that you and I have occasionally bent the rules when we know we can get away with it. And when this happens within our own tissues, within our own bodies, it results in a condition that we all know and many of us fear, and that is cancer. So as a result of genetic changes, mutations, cancer cells can then break the rules of the society within our own bodies. Maybe initially it's breaking one rule at a time, pushing the boundaries, but then everything goes out the window as they take hold and they spread through the body. These cells multiply out of control. They ignore their normal jobs. They gobble up oxygen and nutrients. They create a toxic waste environment around them, and they do not die. And this is also why cancer isn't restricted to humans. We have an idea that cancer is really just, it's a human disease and it's a modern disease and it affects our species because of the things that we do. But cancer is a deep, deep biological phenomenon. Wherever we have multicellular life, we have cancer because it is a process of cells picking up changes and cheating against the society that they find themselves in. And so we find cancer on virtually every branch of the tree of multicellular life, from the most simple to the most complex, going back millions and millions of years into the fossil record. We found cancers in cockles, clams, crabs, catfish, cavefish, cod, corals, quahogs, smelts, sea bream, frogs, snakes, turtles, tortoises, lizards, parakeets, penguins, cockatoos, cassowaries, black-bellied whistling ducks, common or garden budgerigars, from aardwolf to zebra. Wherever we find multicellular life, we find cancer, from whales to wallabies, baboons to badgers, bongos, and everything in between. And this goes deep, deep back in time. So last summer, when my book came out, the very week that my book came out, Rebel Cell, there was an announcement of a new fossil that had been found, 80 million years old, dinosaur bone, with evidence of a cancer called an osteosarcoma. And this is the same kind of bone cancer that affects humans, affects other animals. So this is a deep, deep biological phenomenon. But curiously, there are a few exceptions. So comb jellyfish and sponges seem to be remarkably resistant to cancer. There are no known examples of tumors documented in these organisms to date. For example, one species of sponge, Tethia wilhelma, it can withstand about 100 times of the dose of X-rays that would kill a human. And there are researchers in Arizona who are trying to figure out, how do they do that? Because it's a really interesting potential model for understanding how to resist disease, how to resist cancer, that maybe we can apply those insights to our own species. But the widespread existence of cancer across species, deep, deep back through time, it tells us that this is a process, not that somehow we are to blame for or that we bring on ourselves or that it's a consequence of our terrible, toxic modern lifestyles. This goes deep. It's deeply hardwired into multicellular life. And here's a question for you to think about. If there is complex, multicellular alien life out there somewhere in the universe, do you think that those aliens might have cancers too? I think they probably would, but maybe that's one to talk about. If you have many cells in your body, whatever species you are, there is a chance that some of them will start rebelling against the rules of the society in your tissues and start heading down the road to cancer. This is actually a very rare event. Our bodies, our cells are full of so many genetic changes and mutations that we pick up as we go through life. But only very, very rarely, maybe once, maybe twice if we're unlucky in our whole lifetime, will this actually develop all the way into a cancer. Our bodies are amazing. This is really what I learned while researching this book, that of all the insults, the assaults on our cells and our tissues every single day, we shrug them off. We mostly stay well and healthy and protected from cancer through much of our lifetimes. And I just think that that is, rather than the fear of cancer, I think that's a wonderful thing. How can I keep my body working and keep protecting myself against this? But from the smallest bacterium to the biggest blue whale, species have strived, survived, thrived, and died upon this earth for millions and millions of years. Their genes and their cells and their bodies shaped by evolution according to the environment in which they find themselves. I'm going to wrap up with a quote from Charles Darwin from his work on the origin of species. And he says, "There is grandeur in this view of life. Whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." Now, of course, I'm not arguing that cancer is beautiful and wonderful. It is terrible, it is ugly, it is destructive, it steals the people that we love from us. But the more we can understand it as a process that is deep, deep rooted in the evolution of our bodies, in our evolutionary history, in how these processes of cells and societies are at work within us, the better our chances of controlling the cellular rebellion, and the better our chances of controlling it or even curing it in the future. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you to Kate for inviting me to speak, and I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Kat, for that wonderful and inspiring talk. We will be reflecting on the themes that Kat spoke about in our evening gathering this evening at 7, if you'd like to come back. But for now, we're going to actually sing a hymn together, a song together. So I'll invite our choir to stand up and to remain standing for their postlude music after the closing words. So you should have the words in your service sheet. So please rise and sing with us. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. sung, everyone. We end, please be seated. You can stay up there, though. We end with this quotation chosen by Dr. Kat Arney from the ancient Greek philosopher and scientist Archytas, which sums up science communication perfectly. That though a man were admitted in heaven to view the wonderful fabric of the world and the beauty of the stars, yet what would otherwise be rapture and ecstasy would be but a melancholy amazement if he had not a friend to communicate it to. I now hand over to our wonderful choir for our closing piece.
Sunlight hurts my eyes.